Hello and welcome. This is The Goal is AFL, a new podcast talking all things AFL with myself. I'm Harry. This is Caleb up here. Give us a little bit of an intro, mate. How are you going tonight?
G'day, guys. Obviously, big Brisbane Lions fan, and I've been a huge fan of Harry and all his work over the last couple of seasons. We've known each other for a while. This isn't the first time we've collaborated online, and I'm sure it won't be the last. So, yeah, thank you very much for having me, and excited to talk some footy.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about everything sort of leading up to the start of the AFL season, and it is going to be a blockbuster season following up from 2024, which was, I would say, a fairy tale. Is probably my best way of describing it. I would say that it was one of the greatest seasons of all time. But hey, we're a little bit biased here, but we're going to try and be a little bit impartial. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to run through the complete ladder, what we think it's going to be. I'll give Caleb a chance to do his list and I'll do my list, and we'll kind of go one for one and we'll see how we go. So first of all, any overall thoughts for wrapping up last year and moving on to 2025, what do you think are some key takeaways coming into this new season?
Well, the Brisbane Lions, I think, had one of those seasons where it was lots of highs and lows. And when we got to the final series, I don't think many people were anticipating what we all witnessed. And the fact that we were able to push Carlton into the mud and keep them there that whole game pretty much, and then to pull off one of the biggest comebacks from behind with Joe Danaher kicking the most insane goals against GWS, and then to make it to a grand final and win so convincingly, I think proved to everyone who follows AFL that yes, the Brisbane Lions are a formidable team, but they deserved to win the premiership, even though they had lots of turmoil that they had to go through throughout the season. I think no one can say that they didn't deserve it. And I think the AFL, just as a competition overall, is in a very healthy state right now, because one of the things I was so excited to see come towards the end of the season was that I think with 4 rounds to go, 1st to 13th, no one was locked in for top 8. So that, to me, is a very competitive league, and that adds to the excitement. And as a footy fan, that's what you want to see. Competition that when you win it, it feels bloody deserved.
Yeah, the top spot, which obviously in the regular season went to Sydney, everyone thought, oh, there's no way they can lose. They're never going to lose a game. And then they eventually had a little bit of trouble, to be honest, kind of at the end of the season. We beat them in the regular season as well, as in when I say we, the Lions. Got to try not to do that. We're going to basically, yeah, as you said, the finals was a wild ride. Did it in multiple different ways. Had an easy kind of first game, and then the almost heartbreak of the GWS game, and then turning into ecstasy, and then the Geelong Cats game, which was crazy, and then obviously the grand final, which was a moment that we'll never forget. But yeah, we're kind of, I guess, moving on from last season and then moving towards this season, which feels really good. Cricket season has finished. Which is a good thing or bad thing depending on whether you like cricket. I love cricket, so I'm happy though to be moving into some perhaps cooler season and moving on into footy, which is really awesome to see. So I think
the weather will certainly be cooler, that's for sure.
For sure. It's been ridiculously hot in Brisbane here over the last, 4 months. It's been insane, and I'm so happy that winter is almost here. So we're going to have a look at this graphic here, which basically, as you can see, is completely empty because we are going to fill it with who we think are going to be the top teams when it comes to the end of the 2025 season. So, are you ready, Caleb? Do you want to start us off with your number 1? Not number 1, sorry, number 18. We're going to go from the bottom to the top.
We'll go from the bottom and we'll work our way up. Absolutely. Yeah. So in 18th spot, I've got the Richmond Tigers. I don't believe that they're going to be putting in a very competitive season, unfortunately, which is disappointing to say because, they had such a great dynasty and so many exciting players sort of filtered out of that team. It definitely, they're in need of a rebuild, and they've got a very young squad. They've got some exciting new draftees coming in, but because they have so much inexperience in the team, you're never going to be successful when you've got players learning on the job, so to speak. So I don't think the Richmond Tigers are going to be pulling up any trees, and that's why I've got them as the wooden spoon, which hurts to say because I respect the Tigers as an organization, but as a footy team right now, certainly not in the best shape.
Well, I'll just rip the band-aid off because I've also got them at 18 there. So,
And I
not
think most people would, to be
yeah.
fair.
I saw the kind of Dan Gorridge, his podcast. He was like, I don't see where they're going to win a game. And I guess, I mean, after losing so many superstars and kind of building your team around a certain era of players, it's actually it gives a bit of a testament to guys like the Cats or, teams like that are able to always kind of be, even Sydney, kind of even losing certain players and then just continuing to build others. So I guess Richmond didn't really learn from that, and now they're having to kind of start again. So we'll move on to number 17 for Caleb, which is who?
The West Coast Eagles.
The West Coast Eagles.
Yeah. I was going to say, they've got some exciting players, but as a team overall, I don't fear them, which is crazy to say because they've also had some tremendous success in recent years. But this is the great thing about the AFL is that I remember many seasons ago, the Eagles were down towards the bottom of the table. And then the very next season, their players got their act together and they made it to a prelim final. So who knows what to expect? This is one of those things when I do these sort of predictions is that I'm not a huge fan of it because no one can make an accurate prediction. Doesn't matter how in-depth you go into the statistics, you might get a few injuries and then the whole thing goes out the window. But I would suggest that the West Coast Eagles are not going to be doing anything too special this season. And like they have in previous seasons, they're going to be finishing towards the bottom, and that's why I've got them in 17th.
Yeah, new coach, still kind of young core of players, but I think I'll have them a little bit later on in my list, so I'll hold off on my main comments for them for a little bit. But the team that I have in 17, who may be a surprise, is the Melbourne Demons. I have them at 17. I just see them falling off an absolute cliff this year. I think Petrarca, with the injury that he suffered last year, they have players who don't even want to be there, like Keziah Pickett. So I'm definitely seeing the writing on the wall that Melbourne are going to be down the bottom yet again. I kind of grew up with Melbourne being like the worst team in the league. Melbourne and Carlton were the worst teams in the league for all of my childhood. And so this feels like a familiar place for the Demons. But
I agree.
So sorry, Demons fans. I just think that it's going to be one of those seasons. I just think that they'll need to kind of go into that rebuilding phase. But I could be wrong, but I just think that's where they're going to be. So moving on.
Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
Because when I saw your full list and I saw that you had the Demons down that low, I was genuinely shocked because I thought my position of the Demons was controversial, and you've got them second from the bottom. So that paints a very stark picture.
The thing is,
let's go on to the next one.
The thing is that I think that the gap between 18 and 17 is going to be huge. I think it's going to be 15 to 20 points, 16 to 20 points. I think it's going to be massive. I don't see Richmond maybe meeting one game. And then Melbourne, I think the 17 to maybe 14 to 15 is going to be they're going to be pretty similar. But I just see that the Demons are going to be kind of a little bit down the bottom. Let's just put it politely. So we'll move on to your number 16 team, Caleb, who is...
A team that has been very familiar with the bottom is North Melbourne with Alistair Clarkson.
Yeah.
I don't think they're in a period of disarray compared to other teams in the competition. I think they've got a pretty solid foundation and Clarkson will continue to build on that. But I think their biggest downfall this season will be they just won't be able to score enough goals to be competitive in games. And as a result, if you don't kick lots of goals, you're not going to win games. Simple as that.
That is the name of the game. So yeah, we'll chat about North Melbourne a bit more when I eventually get to them, which, spoiler alert, will not be too long from now. But my number 16 team, I believe in them a little bit more. It's going to be the West Coast Eagles. I think in 16, I think they're going to get a few more home wins. I think that they're going to perhaps get one or two away from home. But I think that they're going to do a little bit better than last year, but not by much. Harley Reid obviously going to take another step forward in his career. Probably going to get a fair few Brownlow votes because they don't really have a huge amount of other players on the team that can step up. But I think that the West Coast Eagles are going to be sitting there at number 16. So we'll move on now to your number 15 team, Caleb. Who is it?
Well, this is the club that we were just talking about, the Melbourne Demons. Also have them towards the bottom. This, I think, is going to be a season that is going to be one that grabs most of the headlines in the competition. I think that there's been lots of behind the scenes turmoil go
Mm-hmm.
on in recent months with the CEO and the sporting direction, and the coach Simon Goodwin has now reportedly uh, decided to build a new coaching tactical plan that he's going to implement this season.
Mm-hmm.
And with the off the field drama with Christian Petrarca and players like Cozzy Pickett, which we mentioned before, and a few others like Clayton Oliver, who are all sort of on the fringes and not quite committed to the team in whatever capacity that may be, that's not quite revealed to the public. I know Cozzy Pickett has come out recently that he's homesick, so a trade elsewhere might
Mm-hmm.
be on the cards. But if what I predict is, I think the Melbourne Demons are going to get off to a terrible start to the season. I don't think they might even get a win up until gather round in Adelaide. They might get past North Melbourne, but I think it's going to be a tough start to the season for them. And when the wheels come off, I think the Melbourne media is going to latch on to that storyline. They're going to take all the headlines, and Melbourne's going to get obliterated in the media, and the pressure is going to build throughout the season. And my other prediction with the Melbourne Demons is that Simon Goodwin is going to get sacked this season. I don't think it's going to be much to be celebrated for Demons fans this season. I think it's going to be a season with lots and lots of turmoil, and that's why I've put them in 15th spot towards the bottom.
Nice, nice. I mean, a little bit higher than where I put them, but again, I agree. I agree with everything there. So, my number 15 team is the North Melbourne Kangaroos. So, I think that they have again, good base, like you said. I think they have a good coach, like you said, and I think that they're going to have an improved season. I'm thinking in the 5 to 6 wins. I think they're going to have a couple of good upsets, and then I guess the real test of a good team is when you come up against those terrible teams, like I foresee Richmond will be, is they have to beat them. You know, you can't have slip-ups against Richmond or against West Coast or anyone who's below you, because
100%.
That's kind of who you're expected to be beating. So if you want to be a good team, you kind of have to beat those teams, and I think that they kind of have a bit more mental fortitude around some of their senior players like Simpkins. So I think that they have, and Bronson, Sherry, Tristan Sherry, one of the best young ruckmen in the league. I think that they've got a good young core. So I see, honestly, a little bit of Brisbane of 2017 era, sort of, good young core that I think they can build around. And I think 15 is going to be a good spot for them.
I think for North Melbourne, it's important that they're the best of the worst, if that makes sense. Like, they don't need to be pulling up any trees, and they're certainly not going to be respected by many fans. And I don't know if North Melbourne fans themselves will be happy with another finish towards the bottom end of the table, but they've certainly got to be better than the other teams that are down there.
Yeah. We'll move on to your number 14 team. So we're already kind of getting off the bottom of the ladder. These are sort of teams that we kind of expect to be perhaps challenging for the 8. So hit me with your number 14.
I would agree with that assessment. Definitely challenging for the 8, but being in 14th spot is certainly nothing to be happy about. And I think that's what GWS fans are going to be experiencing this season. Under Adam Kingsley, I think the finals disaster class that happened at the end of last season was appalling. It's certainly unacceptable, especially what happened against the Brisbane Lions. But to me, again, injuries and form depending, I genuinely think that the capitulation could continue, and a lot of pressure is going to be mounted on those players, and as a result, they're going to be the worst of the challenges, if that makes sense.
Fair enough, yeah. I think that they're going to be a little bit higher than this. Obviously, I don't have them at 14, spoiler alert, but I kind of think that they can go one of two ways. Like you said, they're going to go either crash down to the bottom, or they're going to rise to the top and use that motivation that they, from the failures of last year to kind of push against the teams that are going to go below them. They're going to try and push a little bit higher. I think they just have too many good players in their team. Like, it's just one of those things that I think that it's just talent.
They've got the Coleman medalist in their ranks. So
yeah, I just think they've got goal scorers.
They've definitely got players.
They've got young players. I just feel like we're a bit opposed on this one. So, but that's okay. We're a unanimous. We're not a unanimous podcast here, so we are allowed to have differences. But I'm gonna chuck up
It'd be
my
boring if we all had the same picks, wouldn't it?
very boring. I'm gonna chuck up my number 14 team, which is the St Kilda Saints, similarly to where they kind of were last year. So, yeah, I'm not really expecting a big season from them, unfortunately for Saints fans. But hey, Saints fans are usually pretty realistic people. In my experience, I have a good friend who's a Saints fan, so he is very, very calm about his team. Sometimes the calmness that doesn't usually come from other teams, but I think from the amount of losing that St Kilda have done, I feel like some fans are used to it. And I think that 14th is probably where they're going to be sitting. I just don't see, besides a couple of key young talents, I don't see a huge amount of improvement from last year. Let's just say that.
Do you think Ross Lyon has another finals campaign in him?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think Ross Lyon probably is not the coach to take them there. I don't know. I just think that the way that they play their football is just, it's not exciting. It's not really, I don't know. I feel like he's sometimes limiting the way that his players want to play. He does have players who work really well in that system, like a Jack Steele kind of player, but there are players like Wangadi Millera who I think are a bit more flamboyant and wants to play a little bit faster and in a more high-powered offense is what I'm trying to say. So I think that the Saints at 14 sits pretty well with me. Obviously, you have them a little bit higher, so we'll move on to your number 13 team, Caleb.
All right, in 13, I've got the Adelaide Crows. I think, quite simply, they'll be close, but not close enough. They've got some exciting players across the park. They've got a quite young, inexperienced coach that has had to suffer through some, performances that have not been good enough, and they've, as a result, ended up towards the bottom of the table. But he's been at the helm for, I think, 2 or 3 seasons now, and he has the opportunity to continue to build on that presence. And I think they're one of those teams that you definitely shouldn't be excluding from any possible top 8 predictions. I wouldn't be surprised if they score lots of goals and stuff. In my research, I definitely saw that the forward line is one to watch in the competition coming up. They've obviously got Taylor Walker, who's in there, Darcy Fagati. They've got quite a few players in there that can be a danger in the forward line. But the key is to any successful team are you able to do it over 4 quarters, and are you able to get over the line in those difficult moments? So I don't think Adelaide are quite top 8 material just yet, and that's why I've got them hanging out towards the bottom.
Well, we'll see where I put them eventually. And I just had to stop laughing there. You said Fagati.
How do you say his last name?
Fogarty.
Fogarty,
man.
You read that your whole life and you never hear it said.
I was like, it's like
Fogarty,
bread or something. Focaccia. Anyway, I digress. We'll move on to my number 13 pick. Apologies to all the Crows fans there. Sorry for putting your team so low. But I have the Essendon Bombers, which pains me a little bit because I do have a fair few Bombers fans as friends, and I'd like to see them getting up there, but I just don't see it this year. You lost Stringer. It might be one of those addition by subtraction, making younger players stand up. They still have Zach Merritt, who's one of the best midfielders in the entire league, but I just think that, Essendon again are going to miss out on the finals. I think it's still another rebuilding year. It's unfortunate because only 8 teams can make the finals, and sometimes you wish that more teams could get in the dance, but Essendon just haven't been good enough in the last few years, and I think that will continue again this year.
Can I ask you a quick question about the Bombers? Because I've heard quite a few people in the media acknowledge a lot of things that you just said, but they still are not certain about where they're going to end up in the table. A lot of people have them towards the bottom because there are just other teams that are more obvious, let's say. But do you think that Brad Scott, who's been in the position now for a couple seasons, has what it takes to turn this club from a challenger to someone who will actually compete towards the top end of the table? because his brother Chris Scott is one
Yeah.
of the best there's ever been.
I would say yes. I think that this season though has to be the season where he kind of tries to start and show that sort of level. I mean, I spoke to a few friends who are Bombers fans, and he said that their floor he thinks is like 16th, and their ceiling is like 11th. He doesn't think that they're going to be, and he obviously is a fan of that team, and he knows all the players in and out. And I think that he thinks that they don't have a lot of room to move or improve. So I think that 13 is kind of where I put him based on his advice and what I've kind of seen with their additions and subtractions throughout the off season. So I think 13 is pretty good for them. Obviously, it's not where they want to be, but hey,
That's a fair assessment. It'll be interesting when I reveal where Essendon are on my table.
uh, well, let's move on to your number 12 team. Who is number
Number
12?
12. Well, we've got Footscray, the Western Bulldogs.
Western
Uh,
Bulldogs.
Luke Beveridge has going to be, I think he's going to put in another good performance for his team. But the Doggies are just, again, one of those weird teams that you can't quite predict. They've got some star players like Bontempelli, who's one of the stars of the game. But have they got a squad that has enough depth in it to really push them all the way when they get a few injuries and they have a few players dip in form? And I classify them as one of those teams similar to Adelaide that'll be close, but not close enough.
And today they actually just lost Cody Waitman for half the season. So
I did see that.
It's not great signs there, and I think that obviously injuries, which we haven't really spoken about, do play a huge part in this. So all of these predictions we're kind of making is, I guess, with a caveat of this is who we think the teams are at their full strength. Obviously, if they have injuries, they're going to dip. So I think at full strength, Bulldogs at 12. I'm just going to quickly rip the Band-Aid off because I also had the Doggies at 12. So no reason to make you wait any longer. The Doggies at 12 for me and Caleb. I think that they have good targets in the forward line like Aaron Norton. I think I don't know. I just feel like their midfield is obviously very strong, but their defense not so much, and I think that they're going to slip again. So I feel like that they just squeaked in last year, but this year they're going to drop down a couple spots. So I think we're pretty happy with that. And
losing Bailey Smith and Caleb Daniel, key ingredients in their midfield, I think will also be a big problem for them.
For sure. We'll move on to your number 11 now, Caleb. So who have we got?
Number 11 for me, I think, will be another controversial opinion within the larger footy community because I don't think many people would have this team in 11th spot. But I predict that Port Adelaide will be outside the 8 this season. And the reason I believe that is because at the end of last season, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes problems within the coaching staff. And obviously throughout that season, the Port Adelaide fan base was sort of teetering on the edge of, are we going to keep Hinkley? Are we going to stay behind him? Or are we going to commit the full bandwagon and try and get him out of the club? And I just believe there's a toxic environment simmering at that club, both in the stands and in the dressing room. And Ken Hinkley is the type of character that has a bit of bite to him and is formidable because he demands that respect of his team, but also the opposition. But when he doesn't get his way, I think he's one of those characters that does let things get out of his control. And I think Port Adelaide, after the last couple of seasons, with all that pressure continuing to mount on Ken Hinkley, I think it's going to reach its boiling point. And I think the fan base is going to fully commit to him after he gets a couple of bad results. And as a result, similar to Melbourne, but not to the same extent, because I think Port Adelaide has a better team from the back sticks all the way to the forward sticks. But I've got them in 11th spot because I don't think that they're going to have a very good season full of camaraderie. Let's put it that way.
And they do have a succession plan now, I believe, with Port Adelaide. They have, I guess, talked about the way that Ken Hinkley will move on. So I think that might.
Has that been confirmed? Because I heard something similar.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know if it's been confirmed yet. But there's talks in place, which hasn't happened the last couple of years. So I think there's a way that they're trying to peacefully move him on And I think that might get accelerated, like you said, with a little bit of a poor start. But I just think I won't get too much into it. I have them higher.
The
They're
last
not in
thing I'll
my
say about
11.
Port Adelaide then is I think that they, again, are in a situation because he's been the coach for such a long period of time. You want to pay a bit of respect and give him the send-off he deserves.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, when you're not getting wins and your team's not performing to a high standard, where I think Port Adelaide fans believe they should be pushing for top four and beyond, certainly getting to prelims and finals.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're going to be accomplishing that this season.
Yeah.
And as a result, it's going to get pretty toxic. And that's why I think the wheels are going to fall off of Port Adelaide this season, unfortunately.
Well, we'll move on to my number 11 team. So we're getting into the, trying to get into the 8, challenging. Here's a team that I think that a lot of people have rated very highly, and it's the Hawthorn Hawks. So
this is a crazy decision, by the way.
A lot of people won't
this.
agree with this, but I just think the Hawks are very young. I feel that was a bit of a flash in the pan last year. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this one, but I don't know. Perhaps it's a bit of personal bias. I'm just not a huge Hawthorn fan. Perhaps it's all the years that they were so dominant and then they were in the trenches for like a year and then they were back up. But I just think that this is going to be a classic kind of sophomore slump. I've watched so much sport that I've seen predictions of young teams go awry so many times, and I just feel like this is another one of those classic cases where a team is going to be talked about a lot, and I just feel that this year they will challenge for the 8. Like obviously 11 is still, getting towards that, getting into the finals contention. I just don't see them getting into where a lot of people think they are. So I might be going against the flow here, but that's what I'm saying is Hawthorn's going to be at 11.
It's a crazy opinion, but we'll save it for later why I think you're wrong.
Okay, good one. Well, Caleb, we're going to move on to your number 10 team. Who is number 10?
Number 10 is someone we just talked about recently, and that is St Kilda. Ross
Yeah.
Lyon, I don't think he's going to be able to push them into the 8 this season. Again, St Kilda is one of those nearly teams where they've always had decent players, but never had the stars that are able to push them over the line, like the Brisbane Lions have had in previous seasons. And as a result, St Kilda, I think, will have enough in the gas tank, thanks to Ross Lyon's expertise, to get them into a respectable position on the table. I think 10th is pretty respectable for them, but I don't think they'll get any higher. And I think if you're a Saints fan, you're probably disappointed. But if you're the rest of the competition looking at St Kilda, you look in that and be like, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I mean higher than what I had, so it's you think a little bit more highly of them than I do.
Mid-table, regardless if it's 10th, 11th, 12th, they're going to be mid-table. It's as simple as that. St Kilda, that's their level at the moment.
Yeah.
Will it change in the future under Ross Lyon? I really don't know, but in my opinion, he's one of those coaches that I think is designed for finals footy. You want to see that cut on Channel 7 to the coaches' box, and you want to see Ross Lyon going ballistic or getting excited, but I just don't think the St Kilda team right now is good enough to be pushing into the 8, especially when we do get to the 8 and you see the teams that are in there. There's some really formidable teams in there. So that's my pick for number 10.
Well, we're getting close, and I think this one is pretty much true to form, in my opinion. It's going to be the Gold Coast Suns, the newly minted worst jersey in the AFL. The Gold Coast Suns have decided to put red on red, which who thought that was a good idea? I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm not a huge fan of the Gold Coast Suns. I just think that the fact
What do you mean
that
you don't like Party Town? What's wrong with the Gold Coast?
I just think that I've heard it for so many years that even before Damien Hardwick under Stuart Dew, I was like, got told for years, like, oh, they're coming. They got the best list in the league, and then they trade all these guys, or other guys want to leave back to Victoria.
Their PR team's pretty good.
Yeah, does that win you football games? I'm just saying that I think that I'm just not a huge fan of. I think obviously they have a good list. Like for sure they have some talent, but do they have enough talent? I don't think so. And I think that obviously their home ground kind of advantage is what they kind of leaned upon like a lot last year, but they couldn't win away. Like the best teams win away, and they couldn't do that. And I don't think that's going to change much this year. I think they might take another step, perhaps in effort, but in ladder position, I don't think so. So
I agree with half of what you said, and I disagree with the other half. So
we'll see where you put them.
It'll be interesting to see where the Suns end up. That is for certain.
Well, we'll go to your number 9 spot, which is
Fremantle,
Fremantle.
the other team that exists in the West.
There's two teams?
I know, right?
There's two teams in the West? Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know that. Thanks for
I know.
reminding me.
West Coast taking up pretty much all the members that exist in that state. It's hard to believe that there's another team down there. But yeah, look, Fremantle, I've seen talked about in the media this season by a lot of the pundits and ex-players, and they all have very positive things to say about the Dockers. They've got a really solid back six. They've got some exciting players in the middle of the park that can push the ball forward, and they've got some goal kickers. So when you look at them from defense, midfield, attack, they look like one of the most balanced and solid teams in the competition. And to me, when you look at it from an analytical perspective, you think, well, they've surely got to be pushing for top four. They've got to be one of the best teams in the comp. But for me personally, I just don't think they're going to be good enough to get into the 8, and they'll be that last team that just misses out. And they're going to play good, like their performances will be good, but I just don't think that they're going to win enough of the close games. They're going to have a lot of games that will be decided by 12 or 10 points, and they just won't be able to get over the line. I think they're going to have quite a few of those results, both home and away. And I think the Dockers are going to just miss out this season, which will be a huge disappointment for that fan base.
Well, I've obviously got them higher, so I think I'll chat more about them when we get to them on my list, but I'm going to go with my number 9 team, which is the Adelaide Crows. The newly minted worst logo in the league.
Really? You don't like it?
No, I'm joking. A lot of people didn't. A lot of people thought it was a bit weird, but no, that was a joke. The Adelaide Crows logo is fine. Their whole rebranding was fine. Some people were all like, "Oh, this is terrible," but I really don't care. I didn't think it was that bad. But moving on to the actual team, I just again think that they have a lot of star power. They have Ben Keys, Taylor Walker. Isaac Rankin, guys like that. So they can push, and I think that they play very well at home. They showed flashes last year. They just have to put it together. But I think 9 is a good spot for them. They're not going to make the 8, obviously, with that spot. But I just think that they'll be there and thereabouts. And again, like it is almost every year, I feel that they're going to be very close to getting in the 8. And again, they're probably higher than where you had them at 13. So we've said our piece about the Crows, so we'll move on to Caleb's number 8, the first team in.
For the first time in the club's history,
the
Gold Coast Suns will be playing finals footy. Damien Hardwick has come to the club, made a good first impression, even though they had some underwhelming results last season, which I think is fair to say. But he is one of those coaches that has a very strict system and has to have players do their role to perfection in order for the team to operate at an elite level. And that's been proven at the Richmond Tigers. So no one can disapprove of that assessment, I believe. This being his second season at the helm, working with a lot of these young players, I think he's had time to implement and improve the system, and they're all going to be a lot more comfortable on the field and navigating it in real time, because something that I've talked to other coaches about in the sporting world is that it's one of those things you can deliver instructions and say, midfielder, do this, forward, do this, and it can all be very analytical and straightforward. But at the end of the day, as a coach, you can give them as much advice and expertise as possible. But when the players go out on the field, they're the ones that have to actually deliver. And last season, they had to acknowledge and understand so much new information and a completely different style of football to what Stuart Dew had them playing. And understandably, they had some really exciting moments and had some great victories. I remember that goal after the siren, which was crazy. But they still weren't quite good enough to get to that next level. And I think they've now had that time, they've had that experience. And I think Damien Hardwick, with his extremely high standards, are going to push these players into their very first final series, which I'm very much so looking forward to. It'll be a great headline.
I remember that they had that really good win against Collingwood, and that kind of made people think that they might they might pull it out. But then I think the couple of weeks after that, they had the pretty bad loss to the Lions at home, and everyone was kind of like, oh well, they are who we thought they were. So, I just think the Suns, again, not quite going to make it, but you obviously have a different opinion. So we're going to go with my...
Personally, I think if they did make it to the top 8, it would be one of the biggest stories of the finals campaign because obviously GWS have been there many times. They've even made it to a GF, but the Gold Coast, since their existence, have not made it to the 8. So
yeah,
I just genuinely think that they'll be in amongst it this season. And if they can get that 8 spot, which I predict, it'll be pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people will be like, well, finally. So, no, it's exciting.
100%.
Well, I'll move on to
100%.
my number 8 team. You literally just spoke about them before. It is the GWS Giants. I think that they will have a little bit of a drop-off this year. I don't see them being as good as they were last year, but I still think that they'll have the quality to make the 8. They'll fight off some of the teams below them, which, as you can see, I have there, the Adelaide Crows and Gold Coast. So I think that they'll fight them off. They'll make the 8. I don't see them going much further. They might win one final, but I'm not a huge believer in GWS this year. You already kind of spoke about them. You kind of gave your thoughts on them. I don't really have a whole lot more to say because I kind of said my piece with GWS, that I think that they have either a huge response to that loss last year in the finals, or they just take it and it kind of just capitulates them. But again, I think they have enough talent to be able to push them into the 8. So we'll move on
when I look up capitulation in the dictionary, I do see the GWS logo. So
I watch it every night before I go to sleep. So, we're going to go on to your number 7 team. So who is your number 7, Caleb?
Sam Mitchell is going to lead this very young Hawthorn Hawks into the top 8 this season. They're going to play finals footy, and I do genuinely believe they're going to be the most exciting team in the competition. The reason that they're not going to be higher in the league is because they are a young team, because they are an inexperienced squad. I think they're going to be getting into games that are going to be decided again by 10 or less points, and they're just not going to have the know-how to get over the line. But they're going to have some games where they just demolish teams at the bottom of the table and play some fluid, exciting footy, coming off half-back, down the wing, into full forward, and it's going to be great to watch. We're going to get plenty of selfies posted online, that's for sure. But I do believe that they will not be quite good enough to push into the top 4, which I know a lot of pundits in the media are predicting. But I am very, very confident that they're going to play finals footy this season. And Sam Mitchell, who's been there, done it in a Hawks jersey before, I think he's going to do it with a Hawks coaching shirt this time around.
I think it might be my Australianness of tall poppy syndrome. I'm like, yeah, you guys had your fun, just settle down, settle down a little bit. I don't know. It's maybe I'm just an old man.
It could very much so be a momentum wave. They might just be able to almost grab hold of this enthusiasm in the media and just carry that into the stadium and just play really exciting football. I think all that kind of stuff, confidence, enthusiasm, energy, the exuberance of youth, I think all of that really is going to play in their favor this season because they've got the talent. Unlike other teams like Richmond, who also have a very young team, they have no experience and they've got a coach that's also new to the game, whereas Sam Mitchell has been around for a long, long time. And I think he's going to be able to galvanize this team and push him into 7th spot.
Well, my number 7 team, which is a team that you already spoke about, is the Fremantle Dockers. I think
yes,
that they
I'm
will
interested
be...
to hear what you say about this because, the Dockers making top 8, I think is...
I think that
possible, but they're not likely.
They have a really good midfield. I think that they have Caleb Sarong. They have 2 of the best ruckmen in Jackson and Darcy. I think that they have a talismanic type player in Michael Walters. I just think that playing in the West obviously gives them a bit of an advantage where they kind of have a home field fortress, so to speak. I think they need to play a little bit better away, which is kind of standard of Western Australian teams, but I think that they have enough talent, and I think that 7th spot is a good spot for them. I think they might challenge for top 4. They were looking like a top 4 team last year, and then they fell away. But I think that they have another year of experience, and I think that they can push themselves a little bit further than last year.
Do you think the loss in the Indigenous game in pre-season has any impact at all in the beginning of the season?
No, not at all. I don't even really take much stock into pre-season or exhibition games like that. It's a different mentality, and I feel like AFL is 70% of it is effort. And I think that when you're not really playing for anything, especially with the amount of injuries that happen throughout the season, I feel that, yeah, it's sure you're playing for your spot. A lot of those players were, but I don't think they were going 100%. So I'm happy with Freo at my 7 spot. So we're going to move on to your number 6 spot. Who have you got?
The Sydney Swans are going to be finishing 6th spot, in my opinion.
Swannies.
I think it's going to be a tough season for them, personally. Even though they finished 6th, in my opinion, I think it's going to be a tough season for them. John Longmire, hugely respected in the footy community.
Horse.
But has very much so, I think, burnt that candle at both ends for the last couple seasons. And I think he's about to expire, not in life, in his coaching career, I mean. And I think the addition of Dean Cox is a interesting and optimistic appointment. I think the fact that they have one coach clearly on the way out and a new coach coming in may potentially lead to some issues in terms of tactical approach and philosophy and who we listen to if you're a player, if you know what I mean. But their midfield is elite and they've got quality players around the park. So they'll definitely be playing finals footy. That's a certainty, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. I think they're obviously stacked. They have a lot of talent. I think that Joel Amadi might take another step this year. A bit of an Amadi party
That'd be great to
happening.
see too.
We need another tall key forward in Sydney since Lance Franklin left. But yeah, I think that their midfield is obviously incredible, and they're one of those kind of amazing regular season teams, in my opinion. Obviously, some recent history shows that their grand finals aren't great, but hey, they make it to grand finals, so it means that they're probably going to finish high up in the table. So we'll move on to my number 6 team, which is a team that you already spoke about, which is Port Adelaide. I just think that, again, I kind of spoke about with the Swans, their midfield is just too good. I think with Butters, Horne-Francis, I think that they're just too good, and they've got the one thing that will trip them up is their forward line, which kind of was their undoing last year when they got smoked by GWS in the finals. I think that there was a large amount of discontent between the Port fans. Obviously, you kind of spoke about it before. You've got them in 11th spot, missing the 8. So I think Port, again, 6 is lower than where they finished last year, so they will regress a little bit, but I think they'll still make the finals, and with that spot, they'd have a home final. So I think that Ken Hinkley will still have a somewhat good season, but I don't know if that'll be enough to save his job. Again, we spoke about, is there a succession plan and all that sort of thing. So I think 6 is a good spot for Port.
I think his tactical approach and his man management is going to be called into question a lot this season. And when those headlines start rolling, I don't think he's going to be able to control the media machine. It kind of got out of hand for him at the end of last. And if they don't get off to a good start this season, which I don't think they will, might be curtains on the Ken Hinksley reign.
Hinksley, yep, sure. We'll see what happens. But 6 is where I've got them. So we'll move on to Caleb's number 5 team, who is...
Now, this is going to be the most bizarre choice, and some of you may have already figured out who's not towards the bottom, and that's the Essendon Bombers. I've got them in 5th spot.
Oh.
Now, some of you will be wondering, Caleb, why have you got Brad Scott's Essendon Bombers in 5th spot? And my answer to you is, I don't know.
It's a vibe thing. It's a feeling thing.
I have no idea.
Yeah, right.
I've just got this inclination that there's going to be some magic happen in Essendon. I think it's important to remember that at the end of last season, they were in amongst the top 4 battle for the majority of the season. And then they lost to the last 5 out of their 7 games, I believe. And the season kind of fell apart and it ended out very underwhelmingly. But I don't think their squad is fully stacked with A-listers. So it's not like you look at them and you're like, wow, look out for Essendon. But I think there's going to be one huge upset that comes away from this season. And I think Essendon are going to be able to just somehow ride this wave from start to end and actually make finals footy. And Brad Scott is going to come away pretty chuffed with his team's performance. And I genuinely can't explain any analytical data explanation. I know a lot of Essendon fans will probably say you're crazy. A lot of footy fans will be
Yeah.
like, you're stupid for that opinion. But I just have this
Yeah.
feeling that Essendon is going to finally make a push for finals campaign and belong in amongst it. And fifth spot, I think, could actually happen, and it'll be a huge headline, especially down in Victoria.
And then do they actually win a final? They'll be having a
God,
home
no, they
final.
get straight away. No,
Okay.
they go straight away. They make
Okay.
it to fifth spot.
Yeah.
They make it into the finals. Everyone's hyping Essendon up, and then boom, they're gone.
Yeah,
That'll
right.
be them.
So
See you later.
So okay, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. But anyway, I think so. What they'll be playing the Suns, and the Suns will have their first away
By that
finals
logic,
win.
yes. By that
Right.
logic, yes, Harry.
Okay, fair enough. We'll hold you to that. We'll come back at the end of the season and revisit this this
Can
podcast.
I actually just add one more thing to Essendon, actually? When I was putting this prediction together, there were two outcomes that I was contemplating in my head, because I genuinely looked at Essendon and I genuinely looked at Melbourne, and I was like, these seasons could very easily be flipped, in the sense that Melbourne could actually get their act together and actually finish in fifth spot, be playing finals footy, and actually have a respectable season. And Essendon, after a somewhat optimistic, positive season last season, could have the wheels fall off and Brad Scott's out of a job. And I did deliberate on those two teams, but I think they're the two huge headlines that's going to be happening this season. I just genuinely think Melbourne's going to capitulate in the most explosive fashion. And I think Essendon are going to be the dark horse that really rides off with great intensity into the final series. And I think that's why they're going to finish fifth.
Just like Katy Perry with her dark horse. We'll move on to my number 5 spot, which is the Geelong Cats. I think that fifth is kind of where I see them. I don't think you agree with this, but I think that the Cats, again, fifth spot, they will have a lot of regular season wins. They obviously play very well at home. They have a strong list. They have a great coach. I just think that some of the teams above them, as you'll see in our top 4, just have a little bit more class. And I think that Geelong sitting down there at fifth feels good to me. Again, it's kind of a vibe thing. I just don't see them... This might come back to bite me, but I don't see them finishing a lot of close games, is what I'm trying to say. So I think some games they'll win big. Obviously, they're still going to be a very good team, but I just think that the teams above them, there's more positives that I see in those teams. So what are your thoughts on the Cats? We might get to them in a couple of picks for you.
My very brief initial thoughts are that the Cats have had such great success consistently over the last couple seasons that even though they've got an older, aging squad, they've got enough talent in there to be definitely pushing towards the very top.
Fair enough. Well, let's get into the top 4. So the top 4 teams, number 4 is Caleb's. Who is it?
4th spot is going to be my beloved Brisbane Lions. Now, when I say that, it's not because I think we're going to have a bad season.
What?
I just think the 3 teams above the Lions this season, I think, are going to have significantly better seasons. Now, I'll say I could talk all day about the Lions.
We could.
But my very succinct explanation of what I think is going to happen for us this season is that we're going to continue to be playing positive, exciting, risk-taking footy under Fagan. I think there's going to be an energy and an excitement at the Gabba that is going to really propel our team forward to continue to win games. We've got some exceptional, young, exciting talent coming into the team. And we're also having players that are now old enough, experienced enough to lead this team to some truly great things. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I am not being biased when I say this. I genuinely believe a Brisbane Lions dynasty is upon us. So that's why I am very optimistic, but they are not going to have a flawless season. They're definitely going to be losing a few games. I'm predicting they're going to lose opening rounds at the Gabba to the Cats, and that's why they'll finish 4th and not towards the peak.
Fair enough. Well, I'm going to move on to my number 4 team, which is one of the most hated teams in the league, which is the Collingwood Magpies. I think that the fourth spot, I just feel like they're going to rebound from obviously their premiership year, and then they had missed the finals last year. So I mean, I just think that they have enough talent. They have enough talent coming back. The Dacos brothers, they got Darcy Moore, all of those kind of talismanic players like Jordan De Goey, Mason Cox, all those kind of guys who can turn a game on their head. And I think that it's going to be too much. And I think that they play 90% of their games at home, whether they be the away team or the home team. The kind of Victorian bias, so to speak, it kind of allows them that luxury of being able to play in Melbourne all the time, which means that their players, I don't know, it didn't help them last year, but hey, I just feel like this year it's going to be a bit of a return to form for the Pies.
I tend to agree with a lot of what you've said. This will be the most interesting thing about their season, I think, from an outsider looking in, because when I look at the average age of their squad right now, the average age is 27.5. It's the oldest in the league. They've got some players that have been around a very long time, like Pendlebury, Sidebottom, McStay is in there. But they've also got some exciting young players that are truly electrifying.
Well, should
like
we put
Nick
them up?
Dacos.
Sorry,
Absolutely.
spoilers. They're number 3.
I think the Pies are going to be finishing quite strong this season. I think last season was an example of picking up a few injuries and that kind of derailing a season.
Yeah, premiership hangover.
Yeah, and Craig McRae has a very specific style of footy that he wants to play, and he doesn't necessarily change from that too much. It's just more so about having plan A, and if plan A is not working, do plan A better. And when they had a lot of injuries last season, it wasn't always successful for them. I don't think they already have any major injuries coming into this season, none that I'm aware of. And if they keep a fit squad, and again, talking with the idea of every team on this list being at 100% fitness, fully fit and firing, I think Collingwood, based off their team, with the experience they have and the young, exciting players that are coming through the ranks, I think they're going to be finishing third on the table. And Nick Dacos to get the Brownlow medal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll be close, very close, but I don't think he's going to win it. I think I'll make a prediction later on in the episode. But first I'll get to my number 3 team, which is the Sydney Swans. I think that they, again, like I said, when you put them at 6, they just have a lot of talent. They have, good home ground advantage. They just have kind of that experience in the regular season, which I think will propel them. So I think number 3 is pretty good for me. Again, I kind of spoke about them before when you put them at 6. So we'll move quickly on to your number 2 team. Who is your number 2, Caleb?
Now, when I was doing this prediction list and I was figuring out who I was going to have in first and second, there was only 2 teams I ever had any thought about. I was very confident about picking these 2 teams. And I think in second spot is going to be Carlton. Michael Voss is going to galvanize this team after their demoralizing, anticlimactic exit in the final season last. And he is going to get every single player in his squad to be fit, firing, and performing at their peak. They've got a pretty decent list across the whole park. And I think Michael Voss has had plenty of years in coaching.
Yeah. And
quite interestingly, over the off-season, he spent some time in England with a fellow Australian, Ange Postecoglou, at the Tottenham Hotspur Premier League soccer club, and was learning in a different sporting environment, understanding a different dressing room culture, and picking up some tips and tricks from Ange Postecoglou, who is one of the best sporting stories in Australian history, that's for sure. And I think he's going to bring that back and imbue that knowledge into his team. And I think you've got quite a few players in there like Patrick Crisp, who are going to continue to hit those levels, and they are going to be one of the most formidable teams in the competition. And I make a similar comparison to what has happened in the English Premier League in recent years. I think Carlton and, spoiler alert, Geelong are going to be the Manchester City and the Liverpool of this season. I think those two
Yeah.
teams are going to be far and away ahead of the
Yeah.
competition and be leading in huge strides. And I think Carlton, if you're a Blues fan, you're going to be extremely excited about this season, because not only do I think you're going to get second spot and have some really exciting victories, but I think you might actually go really deep into the final series for the first time in a very, very long time.
Well, number one, let's hope that they don't, for the sake of just prediction, take any cues from Tottenham's actual team, and the way that they've performed this year.
Touche, Harry.
So I think that I put the Cats up there because obviously by, elimination, the Cats are obviously the last team left, so you think of them as number one, but we'll get to them in a sec. I'm going to first of all chat about my number 2 team, which is the mighty Premiership winning Brisbane Lions, and you put them at 4, I put them at 2. I think that they'll get a home final, chance for a home prelim. I just think that the list is stacked. I feel like the experience is there, the pedigree is there. We have the best defender in the league. We have arguably the best midfield in the league. We have an incredibly young, talented forward line, which, yes, it's going to have a hole. Joe Danaher's gone. I just think that we have enough stock to perhaps make up the goals with the midfield. We have Will Ashcroft, we have Levi Ashcroft, arguably the best young player in the draft coming to our team this year. I just think another year of Will Ashcroft, another year of Lachie Neale, Hugh McCluggage rising up again. It's too overwhelming, and I feel like with the addition of, again, Lincoln McCarthy's coming back from injury, Tom Doedee, Kitty Coleman, hopefully coming back from injury. Again, all these things that I guess we thought this was going to happen last year. And at the start of the season, it looked like it wasn't going to happen because of injuries. And again, I preface this by saying all of these predictions are when the teams are fully fit. And I think with fully fit Lions, there is absolutely no excuse to not finish in the top 2. And then going on from my number 1 team, as you can kind of already tell, is the Carlton Blues, the team that the Lions beat in the first game of the final series last year for the Lions. So I think that the Blues, as you said, have a stacked team. I think that they're going to have a back-to-back 3-time Brownlow medalist in Patrick Cripps. I think he's gonna win it again. I just think that their team is going to be incredible. They have 2 of the best forwards in the league. They have great defense, and I think that the Carlton Blues are going to finish close top with the Lions. I think it's going to be a bit of a back and forth battle, and I feel that maybe there'll be 1 or 2 wins, and the games where we play each other, with the Lions and the Blues play each other, is going to basically decide the top 2. That's my feeling. What are your feelings on that? And then who is your number 1, as we can kind of see the Cats, if you wanted to elaborate on your list?
I want to pick up on what you just said, because I think the Brisbane Lions are definitely going to be having some battles towards the top end of the table that's really going to make a clear impact on how that top 4 runs out. The way I look at it is our forward line is very much so going to have plenty of positives, in the sense that we've got so many small forwards that are going to be contributing goals. But the fact that we don't have a tall forward that has come in to replace Joe Danaher, that has that presence, that can play forward, that can get involved in the ruck, I think is going to be a huge problem for us. And I see a lot of Lions fans predicting that Logan Morris is going to potentially play that centre-half forward role. There may be others, but I just don't see that as being a long-term solution. And I think that the Lions are going to not be as formidable in their forward line. They're still going to be very, very good. I've got them in 4th spot, so this isn't a criticism of them. But I don't think Charlie Cameron's getting any better. I don't think Lachie Neale's getting any better. And Lincoln McCarthy's getting up there. And I think that's going to work both as a positive and as a con, because they're experienced players that got so much composure within their system. But at the same time, are they going to be as clinical and as sharp as they have been in previous seasons? Not in my opinion. But they're not going to have bad seasons, any of those 3 players I listed. But I think not having another tall forward to back up Eric Hipwood in the forward line is going to be problematic for the Lions. And as a result, they're not going to win games that they're going to need to in order to push up into 2nd spot, which you have predicted.
Yeah.
And for me, I think having Collingwood, Carlton and Geelong ahead of them is indicative of those three teams just having better seasons than the Lions.
Okay.
I think Collingwood, despite having the oldest squad in the competition, I think are just going to be consistent all year round, not having injuries, that is. Like I said, Carlton, I just think all their players are just going to hit their prime and really peak this season and accomplish something pretty special. And I think another thing that we haven't talked about in depth is that the reason I think Geelong are going to be the most deadly team in the competition this season is because they also, similar to Collingwood, have a very old squad. Collingwood's was 27.5, like I mentioned before. Geelong's is 27.1, and Brisbane is 26.3. So they're all sort of in that perfect age range of having experience, having young talent. But Chris Scott is the coach of the Geelong Cats, and he just somehow finds a way to get the right tactical approach and make sure the players are performing to a high level. And yes, they've had one or two blips over his tenure, but he's always been able to bounce back instantly and get back into finals footy. And even though they've got some big players out, like Tom Hawkins is no longer at the club, Zach Tui, players that have such a huge impact on the dressing room and their experience and their wisdom that they can pass on to the players is going to be deeply missed. But I think what's going to make up for that is the fact that they have an extremely exciting midfielder coming into their ranks in Bailey Smith. And I understand he's a bit of a polarizing character for some because there are some games where he just doesn't kick straight and isn't accurate and doesn't quite do the job that he's required. Some could maybe lay some blame at the coaching decisions. But for me, I've seen lots of performances with him that have been very, very high quality. And when he's on his day, I think he can be one of the best in the competition. And I think the fact that he is going to be existing in a midfield that has players like Paddy Dangerfield, and the fact that Chris Scott is going to be able to take his talent and imbue it into his style of footy, I think it's going to be a recipe that works wonders for the Cats this season. And they also have, I think, more games at in Geelong at their home stadium than they have in previous seasons, and that stadium is a fortress for them. So that's an easy 4 points that they're going to be collecting on a regular basis, and I think the Geelong Cats are going to be the best team in the competition this season. However, I don't believe they're going to win the premiership.
Oh, well, perhaps later in the if we do another episode, it's still pre-season, we can do a little bit of a, I guess, premiership predictions. I'm not sure. I can't really try and predict who is going to win the premiership. I just was flat out making a top 18 list. So we'll get into that a little bit later. And again, all of this is precursors to no injuries at the start of the season, who is going to be the best team. And yeah, I just think, first of all, we're going to have a look at some of the, in my opinion, the largest gaps or largest surprises between our clubs. I think that the one that stands out to me is Essendon. And for a little bit, the Suns that kind of surprised me a little bit.
Which is totally fair.
Who out of your list what's the biggest gap that you're seeing between our lists?
Well, the Hawks for starters. Even though 7th to 11th isn't that big of a jump, your opinion on them being a one-season wonder, I don't agree with. I think it's likely that the momentum is going to carry them into great success again this season.
Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to point out, and I said it at the beginning of the video, but last season, the table towards the tail end of the season was so very close. So when you look at our tables between both mine and Harry's, I think it's fair to say that, at least on mine, I'm looking at 13th upwards, all being very, very close. I think Geelong and Carlton will be light years ahead of everyone else. I think Collingwood will be, and Brisbane will be there, towards the top end in terms of points. But I look at Essendon, Sydney, Hawthorn, Gold Coast, Fremantle, St Kilda, Port Adelaide, Footscray, and Adelaide. I look at all those teams being very similar in points and accomplishing the same amount of wins in a season. And as a result, I think it's going to be very, very close. So, like, you look at teams like the Gold Coast who get into my eight, they
Mm-hmm.
might get in there based off percentage. Like, it could be that close.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's going to be a lot of teams, like I mentioned, Adelaide, the Bulldogs, St Kilda. They're going to be teams that are close, but not close enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be very, very competitive throughout the season. There's going to be a lot of plot twists, that's for sure. And that's why I think Essendon are going to be coming into the finals and being that big plot twist, that dark horse that no one expected.
Mm-hmm.
And I think GWS are going to have a fall off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Melbourne are going to have an absolutely catastrophic season. I could be wrong. It could be completely flipped.
Yeah.
A lot of these teams could be cruising in top four, and Essendon could be dead last. I really don't know. But when I look at that table, I think between you and me, there are a lot of teams that make a lot of sense in terms of their placement. But I think our teams that we've got towards the top end and towards the bottom end are pretty accurate.
Yeah.
It's those teams in the middle where it's going to be bloody exciting to see where they end up.
Well, I have two teams that made the finals last year missing this year, and you've got three teams coming in. So you've got a difference of three different teams. You got Essendon coming in, you got the Pies coming back in, you got Suns coming back in, whereas I've got the Freo Dockers and who else did I have? Freo and the Pies coming back in. So, kind of not a huge amount of change on my end. Some of the teams down below, a little bit of change there. It's kind of the positionings. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with my list. So yeah, any last thoughts before we wrap this bad boy up?
Not really. I was going to say, all I really think about this AFL season is that it's going to be bloody exciting. I know the AFL, in terms of in-stadium attendance and broadcast figures, is going up dramatically in the positive direction. AFL in this country is the number one sport. That's undeniable. And I think it's going to be very exciting to see how these teams perform. And I genuinely believe the Brisbane Lions, I'm saying this as unbiasedly as possible, I do think we have one of the best teams in the comp, and the dynasty is coming, and I'm very much so looking forward to it, despite Carlton also being in amongst it.
Goosebumps. Yeah, I think it's going to be a great season, and everyone's got the pre-season kind of jitters going, and excited for March the 6th, which is going to be the first game. Go for it.
The last thing I'll say is I'm also very much so excited for the little documentary that Fox Footy is putting together, releasing on the 4th of March for the Brisbane Lions. There's going to be some great intel and behind-the-scenes looks in terms of that dressing room and their premiership accomplishment.
Yeah.
And when you look at the modern era of the AFL, looking 2000s onwards, you've had some great dynasties. You've had the Brisbane Lions of the early 2000s, the Hawthorn Hawks, Richmond, obviously. You've had teams like Geelong who have existed in the competition, have been sustainable and competitive for so many years. But in terms of pure one-season storylines, I genuinely believe Chris Fagan turning around our season and pulling off the unthinkable when every single pundit in the media had written the Lions off, and to galvanize our team and push us over the line, and then to win so convincingly against a very good team, the Sydney Swans, I think puts us up there as one of the best storylines in the AFL of the modern era. And I'm very much so excited to see what Fox Footy have cooked up for us. So it's going to be another good footy season. That's all I'll say. But thank you, Harry, for having me on and discussing some footy. As always, it's a pleasure talking to you, and can't wait to get started in the AFL season.
Nice. Well, I will, I guess, have the final word. I guess everyone else has already turned off. We finished the list, so I can chat a little bit about Brisbane Lions. But yeah, I was in the room for the awards ceremony, and basically everyone's sentiment was that it was the craziest season. And this is like from guys who have been in football, like Chris Fagan, for decades, and they've seen everything, and they just couldn't believe what was happening. And I think that was kind of the sentiment, especially because we played the last 3 games away from home. We didn't have any chance to connect with them in person, at the Gabba. We had to kind of watch on TV, and that somehow made it feel a little bit surreal in some way, like it wasn't happening in front of your eyes type of thing. So I think it will really become grounded and actually wow, this actually happened when they unfurl the championship, like the premiership banner, and they obviously see the documentary, and just like within the season, people just refer to the Lions as the reigning champions. I think that's when it will start to become a bit more grounded, I feel, like that's just my feeling on the season. And yeah, I agree that this was a great kind of wrap up of 2024, moving on to 2025. So I'm glad that you have come on this podcast. Hope everyone enjoyed watching/listening to us. So really excited for what this season brings to us. Again, this is the goal is AFL with Harry and Caleb. We're going to be going throughout the season, so hopefully join us every single round and you'll be able to hear our thoughts. Two lads from Brisbane who are hopefully going to be doing a little bit more of an unbiased review. But yeah, we are definitely excited for this season. So thank you so much to everybody. Have a good day.